And I think programming, you learn sort of the ins and outs. You have a byte and you have a binary number, and there's all these little properties you can put in. And so like an ISBN number or other things can be, maybe they're encoded in a way that has all these useful properties. And instead of just being an auto incrementing ID, there's all these things that you can add to it. And I think that's sort of like the intuition that I hope people get from programming versus the specifics of like a for loop or something. I mean, for most people, I don't think that's that useful. It's more, hey, can we be structured about how we approach things?
Hey everyone, and welcome to Developer Tea. My name is Jonathan Cottrell, and in today's episode, I finished my interview with Kalid Azad. As you've probably already heard if you're listening to the third part, this interview with Kalid has been such a fun discussion and really enlightening. Kalid is a very smart individual, and I hope all of you have been inspired and you learn from him as much as I have been learning from him. Don't forget that we have the JavaScript January Developer Tea CodePen contest. This is still running. You can tag a pen on CodePen, just a normal pen. You can tag it JavaScript January or JS January, as well as Developer Tea. And you can have spaces or no spaces, doesn't really matter as long as you have those two tags. And the pen has to be JavaScript oriented. It has to rely primarily on JavaScript for its main functions, its main features. And whichever pens get the most hearts with those two tags that rely on JavaScript, there are going to be 6 winners in this contest. Whichever top 6 pens with the top 6 numbers of hearts, you all are going to win a year of CodePen Pro. So go ahead and get entered into that contest. It will run until February 5th. So we are almost done with this contest. Really excited about the entries. Thank you, of course, to those of you who have entered the contest already. By the way, we'll be announcing the winner to the JavaScript January contest on the Spec Slack community. You can join that by going to spec.fm/Slack. Make sure you join the Developer Tea Room. I'm sure we will make a quick announcement in the general channel as well if you forget to join the Developer Tea Room. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Developer Tea. I hope you enjoy my interview with Kalid Azad. I was about to say structured data, right? That's really what, when we say we want people to learn, everyone needs to learn how to code, what we're really saying is we want everyone to learn how to think about these blobs of information in their lives and how to apply conceptually, how do I organize information? How do I search information? How do I apply this to my physical life? How can I going back to the road example, how can I navigate without my phone when it dies?
Exactly.
And really, when I say I want you to learn how to code, it's because learning how to code has taught me in many ways how to think better. And it sounds so simple, and that's why obviously we can't campaign for thinking better, right? Like so we attach it to coding or we attach it to math, but really what we're hoping is for people to be educated on. Okay, here's for example, I was thinking about structured data and specifically about objects versus arrays, right? A list of things versus a key value store of things, and trying to think of a physical object or physical representation of this. It's like houses versus apartments, right? A house is like an object where you have keys and values. You can only get into one house at a time. And an array is like an apartment where you enter the building and all of the apartments are in the same building. And it's such a weird, maybe not even that useful way of thinking, but it informs so much about what you could do with that. You could take that and apply it to, for example, logistics. You could apply it to delivery systems and say, okay, we want to deliver to apartments last because we know we can get all of the apartments done in much faster than we can get the houses done, right? Very simple things like that if you learn how to think, if you learn how to structure information around you or structure information in text that is otherwise unstructured, well, now you can do really interesting stuff with it.
Exactly. And I think a key element too is there's a lot of structured and like mathematical things out there already, and it's just kind of up to human beings to notice them. So, exponential growth, I think, was discovered or E, I think it was discovered in the 16 or 1700s. So, bacteria colonies and yeast, and we'd had interest in all these things for a long time. But then I think it took Napier and Euler to figure out, there's this idea of like like an underlying rate that can be computed, and there's like a natural log and all these things. But we basically kind of notice these things; they're sort of pulled from it. So the same thing with this kind of computing mindset, where hey, in my everyday life, there's a lot of things that are fairly computational, especially in like the modern world where we have all this technology around us. But it's just that a lot of times we don't recognize it. So like to a Roman, the idea of having numbered roads is crazy. It's like, what do you mean? Like this is road 1 and road 2 and road 10. Like you don't call it the glorious green path and the beautiful red path. Like you're actually numbering your roads. So yeah, it's actually a lot easier. I mean, but to them, it seems like crazily scientific. And to us, I mean, I'm not even sure what the analogy. It would be like having like an equation. Like, what's the name of this road? It's the parabolic, x squared road.
Yeah,
and it's like, why would you call it that? It's like, well, because it curves in such a way, and it's really easy to think about when we know it. And it's just, to us, it's kind of comically precise. But I think in the future we have something similar where basically we understand things so well that what looks super scientific to us now, to like a child is just normal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it has become that way in certain areas that we haven't really, like, it's hard to recognize because we are in the context, right? Like we're kind of embedded already into it. And so, the level of knowledge about, for example, the obvious one is children who pick up a phone, before they even know how to read, but they know how to swipe. There's this really interesting intuition that's happening there that later on in their lives may give them a much higher level of dexterity with the tools they use than we have now. And just viewing that, watching that, obviously we had similar things when we were growing up, and our parents had similar things when they were growing up. The progression is very interesting, but I think this idea of, what you're doing with Better Explained is spreading this concept of intuition. It's spreading the concept of looking at things and finding the underlying system and finding how they work. Very, very powerful, and I think it's a really good mission. So real quick, we're gonna pivot and talk about that history for just a few minutes before we wrap this thing up.
Sure.
Better Explained has been around for 10 years now. A little over 10 years because it started in 2006, right?
Yep, near the end of 2006.
Okay,
so yeah.
Right at 10 years now. And so if you can, rewind your brain back to about 10 years ago. What was the first, I guess maybe 10 and a half years ago, whenever you first started formulating this, what was the spark that really lit the fire? That sounds super cheesy, but what was the thing that really just compelled you to start?
Sure. So I began Better Explained, I guess, in college. I began taking notes in college after I had a super frustrating math class my freshman year. So I had always enjoyed math in high school and growing up. And then in what I now realize, I was in a very poorly taught math class. And of course, I just thought, things aren't clicking. Something's wrong with me. Like, I just got to study harder. And I couldn't at the time see that, the approach was actually not that great that we were taking. But I remember cramming for a final, and finally some analogies came to me that made like months of studying just snap into place. And it was simultaneously relieving and frustrating. It was kind of like, it's almost like, hey, somebody pointed out you had food in your mouth or food in your teeth. It's like, okay, thank you. But oh my God, couldn't you have told me like a week ago? Like, I didn't know. I had like a seed, so it's kind of like, oh my gosh, why did we spend all semester learning? And this was like a vector calculus class. So we're learning about vectors and like rotating things and twisting things. And there's really very, very little visual intuition. And I just made some diagrams that seemed to help me a ton. And I was angry and happy at the same time. I remember that feeling very well because it was so weird. It was like angrily happy or something. I was like happy and frustrated, and it was like this weird combination of emotions. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like I would have paid anything to have avoided the frustration that I had.
It's like a feeling of loss almost, right?
Loss. It was just kind of like this wasted effort. Like I just wasted all semester cramming and it was for no reason. It wasn't like I was getting better at the concept. I was, spinning my wheels for so long, and finally I got some traction on this analogy that helped. And so I just started writing down these things and said, okay, like for myself too, I didn't want to forget it. And also it was, hey, if it helped me, maybe it would help somebody else. So I started taking these notes down, and in college, I kind of put them on my college website, and they got pretty, a good amount of traffic then, but I sort of just left them up there. And then I started working for a couple years, and I'd sort of forgotten about it. And then I decided, okay, I want to kind of leave my first job and try some startup things. And so before I left, I was just writing down ideas for projects. And so I had this idea book, and I was just kind of journaling. And one of the ideas was essentially to start a learning site based on these notes. And I remember thinking, okay, what should I call it? Should I use my name, like kalidazad.com? I was like, no, it's not about me. And also my name is probably hard to spell if you never, it's not a common name. So I'm like, okay, pragmatically speaking, it's probably not a great domain to have anyway. But then I realized, better explain. Like, I just want to explain things better. And so it's not about like the best in the world and this is the greatest thing ever. It's like, no, this just helped me. Like, this was better than what I had before. So I just want to share it. So I basically just got the domain, and I started transferring over my college notes. So I think the idea happened in probably May, and then I started putting the notes together and transferring things over in probably September of 2006. And then that December, I started copying over a bunch of my notes, and basically 2007, I just went crazy and started writing a lot. And so then, basically 10 years later, here we go. It's about 100, maybe 160 posts over that time. So it's not a huge amount. It's about, on average, about one post a month, I'd say, for over 10 years. But thankfully, because they're evergreen, you sort of, it's built in this kind of reference library of intuitions that each of them kind of over time collect people.
It is very interesting how simple it is, isn't it? So you it's not like you had this master 10-year plan already laid out in front of you. You experienced something of what you, at the time at least, felt like was insanely valuable, intuition, or insanely high amount of value in this information that you couldn't find anywhere else. And basically you just shared it. And it's very... it's a common business model, more common than people recognize. I think it's, you scratched your own itch, certainly, but then you turned around and said, "Hey, look, this is how I figured this thing out." And it's not like a massive business, spreadsheet where you're doing all the numbers on whether or not it's worth it to post about this particular intuition. How many people are in calculus this year in high school? No, that's not what it was about for you. And so I think a lot of people, they lead up to the release of something or the creation of something, and they spend too much, perhaps a crippling amount of time, trying to evaluate whether or not it's worth their time. And I do this sometimes on a day-to-day basis. I'll spend too much time making my to-do list for the day, when really I know pretty much the most important one or two things to do. And I actually use, there's a guy named Donald Miller. He has a excellent podcast called the Story Brand Podcast. Regardless of your opinion on that particular stuff, he has this really cool day planner that I use. And one of the things that he has on the day planner is, if I could do this day over, what would I do differently? And the point is to actually do that at the beginning of the day rather than at the end of the day. So you're kind of predetermining the things that you're going to screw up, like the things you're prone to mess up that you've done in the past. And you're fast forwarding and doing like a postmortem on the day if it fails. A very interesting concept, but I use this time, and sometimes I'm sitting there looking at my schedule for the day, or I'm looking at my list of to-dos for the day, and I'm thinking, well, is this actually worth it? I'll go down a rabbit hole of deciding which things should really make it on the to-do list. And that's totally, it's just another level. It's like a high level of procrastination, really.
Yeah, no, I like that, acknowledging that you're likely to mess up on things and addressing it before you do so. Yeah. I like that sort of psychological game there, because it's true. I mean, I fall into the same things. I don't see myself as a very disciplined person at all. I'm not, basically, I acknowledge my own lack of discipline, and therefore my approach is to say, hey, as long as I have again, like the evergreen motivation. So I'm going to fall off the wagon. I'm going to post more frequently and less frequently, and I'll be motivated or not. But as long as I have this warmth to coming back to the project, then I'll continue getting up. So it's sort of that, like, I'll come back to the gym because nobody's going to yell at me for being missing. And that's why I come back. So I'm not white knuckling it and hoping that I can't, break my streak or something. I say, okay, I'm going to, like, let's just pretend. Actually, another exercise I do is just pretend today you've already been slacking for like a week or a year. Just whatever happened. I mean, it's very likely that there's going to be a point where you do slack for a week or a month or something. So just pretend that already happened. Do you have the warmth in the project to come back to it? Like, do you feel any guilt, and then you can sort of put yourself in that mindset. So I tried to find ways to visualize that scenario happening where, yes, at some point I will have forgotten or not done anything, and let me come back to it. And can I kind of work through that? And, maybe I have some guilt or something lying around. Okay, let's try to work through that as well. So I think that's a great exercise. Another thing too is, for the project itself, I sort of had this kind of intuitive kind of hunch or whisper or something in my brain, which is that there's got to be a better way. And so I think seeing the analogies work so well, it basically gave me this is the kind of, I suppose, like the iron determination that it's almost like a philosophy of life, but I basically believe that pretty much anything can be understood intuitively. It's not necessarily easy to find that intuition, but there is a way that it can make sense. I don't think a concept it's not supposed to be intellectually only. You're supposed to like feel it. You're supposed to understand it as much as you understand a circle. Basically the difference between a circle and parabola, like a parabola can become a circle in terms of understanding. Like there is a way to get it to click to that level. Mm-hmm. We haven't maybe practiced it or found it. That's just sort of an underlying belief. And so that drives me in the sense that I know at some point, it might be a year. I mean, I've had intuitions that have taken years. I have like a text file, and I basically, for each topic, and I'll think about it for a little bit. I'll write something down. I'll come back to it. And maybe, months or a year later, something snaps into place. I say, oh, that's what's going on. And I write it down, and then I try to turn it into, basically as soon as I have an aha moment, I try to write it down into an article, just because there's kind of a freshness there, and there's an excitement, and I'm motivated to write about it. And also I think there's like a genuine, like it's hard to remember what something is like. It's hard to remember what it's like to be confused a long time ago. For example, like even learning to read, I can't remember learning to read. I can't remember looking at a letter and not knowing that it's an S or like a W. Like I just can't remember that at all. So it's hard to write. Like if I were to write kind of a teaching kids how to read post, it would be really difficult because I can't empathize with that problem.
Right.
And so I try to capture it right when it's happening, because I can say, ooh, like this thing really bothered me, and here's how I fixed it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like trying to give really detailed directions. Going back to our previous discussion about memory, it's like trying to give detailed directions to a place you haven't been to in 10 years in a different city. Exactly. You know about where it is, you remember it, and you remember kind of how you got there. And you know how you would get there now from where you are, maybe, but trying to tell someone who's in that place, really detailed and specific, don't turn left there. That's, the map is wrong or something like that. That's a really hard thing to do. And I tell people this all the time, especially young developers. Don't waste the opportunity to teach while you are learning. It is super, super important that you take that opportunity, because once you get too far away from that subject, regardless of the subject, whether it's writing letters or writing JavaScript, right? It is JavaScript January, by the way. I thought I'd mention that on Developer Tea, but regardless of what you're learning, whatever you learn, you will be most able to teach directly afterwards. And there are a few minor exceptions. Some teachers gain intuition by being around the people who are learning and seeing the patterns of learning over and over and over, so they can see kind of stay connected to that, right? But if you walk away from it and you haven't been near it for a while and you want to teach it, it's going to be a lot harder to remind yourself the mental disposition of someone who doesn't know what you know now.
Exactly. And I think another benefit is that I realize this too. I want to learn from somebody who was kind of in my shoes and then overcame it, and not someone who was already at so we kind of look to role models. So let's say, hey, should you take workout tips from like Arnold Schwarzenegger or some bodybuilder? I mean, yeah, they probably have very deep insights, but they're super motivated. They're determined. It's like a life mission. It's like getting basketball tips from Michael Jordan. I mean, his tip is going to be practice 8 hours a day or something. It's going to be something like
exactly
to get to that level. It's a certain level of performance and things, but maybe that's not where you are. I would rather get basketball tips from like a good high school player who plays a few times a week and, hey, what's worked, because they're kind of more in my environment and
they're your next step up, right?
They're my next step. Exactly. And so even for workouts, like, hey, getting in shape, let me get tips from somebody who started where I was and what worked for them versus someone who maybe was already interested in fitness their entire life. And so it's like the tip is to, start when you're 5 years old or something. There's a lot of empathy that comes from that. And so my approach to writing is, hey, I'm writing for sort of a curious person who is willing to learn. I'm not trying to, if someone doesn't like math at all, I'm not going to try to, convince them that they need to like it. But for someone who's reasonably interested, it's like, hey, okay, there's an intuition here that we can go through and let's walk through it together. So you sort of, you have an audience wherever you're starting from. There's an audience of people that are in similar shoes to you, and you can relate to them much, much better than like the ideal professional could.
Oh yeah.
So I think,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like installing a 300 horsepower engine on a scooter, right? Like, it's
exactly.
It's just not going to work. It was never intended for that. If you want a faster scooter, that's not the route to go. You don't aspire to become something overnight. You aspire to become something through a progressive steps. And yeah, there are times where you make major jumps. Those aha moments may be those particular times. Maybe that jumps you up a little bit more than, one small step might. But certainly the idea of progression and patience and in the learning process, your brain can only move so quickly, right? Especially as you get older, your brain becomes less pliable, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully we have all done enough thinking about this at this point. And those of you who have listened to Developer T, we talked about that. The plasticity of your brain over time. It's harder to learn new information when you've already coded information into your brain for so long, right? But still is certainly possible and becomes more pliable as you engage in learning actively. So one of the reasons why I recommend constantly learning is to keep your brain pliable, to keep yourself moldable. It's kind of another tangent there, but yeah, stair-stepping your progress and stair-stepping your expertise. You aren't looking to jump from zero blogging to white paper level quality info. Like that's probably not going to be an overnight process for you.
Exactly. And I think there's this fear that, I'll waste time if I don't, I should do what Michael Jordan did because he is at the end point and I just want to get the direct path. But I'm personally okay to zigzag a little bit. Like, yeah, I get the advice from the good high school player. And yeah, it's not the best, but I get better. And then maybe if I get to that level, then the good college player. And then, okay, maybe then like a European League NBA player. And then the American, like if you're going that on that path. And for a lot of things, like it might sound like, oh, that's suboptimal because you could just try to follow the NBA advice on day one. But again, there's this motivation element, right? So if the payoff to getting better on Michael Jordan's plan is 20 years or 15 years, it's going to be really hard to stay motivated. But the high school player, maybe there's something that he can give you that will make you better that week for your rec game. And then, so like it's, there's all these other elements. And so that's kind of the global variable that we don't see, is that there's this motivation element, which might be based on how quickly you're seeing progress and so on. So the Michael Jordan path might work if you are that determined, but for most of us, if you like, I acknowledge my own limited motivation. And so then I say, okay, well, given that I'm just a human being with limited motivation, I'm not a machine, what path can I take that's going to keep my motivation high? And having even if it zigzags a little bit, as long as it's fairly enjoyable, I don't mind taking a little bit longer. So Better Explained, in the post I read about this too, I had some thoughts previously, and I kind of worked through these around, for like a blog. I mean, it wasn't really ever, I didn't start it intending it to become a business. It was really just kind of a creative expression or like an outlet for that. But then over time, it started turning more into a business as well. But I say, okay, it's been around for 10 years. Like, shouldn't I be a bazillionaire by now? Like, there's all these huge projects, right? But I mean, maybe I could have pushed myself harder, maybe, but I kept my motivation, and I feel like I want to do this pretty much for the rest of my life. So that outcome of having a lifelong learning project, like I can't really argue with that. I say, okay, is that a bad thing? I don't know. For me, like, I'm pretty happy. Like, maybe it could have been faster, but I don't really worry about that too much. And so it's sort of, yeah, maybe you take advice from the high school basketball player, and maybe you could have gone a little bit faster if you'd followed different advice. But if you were motivated the entire time, and if your goal is to have lifelong learning, like in my case it is, like, I don't want to risk burning out or getting discouraged, because that stops the whole process. So yeah. I'm trying to keep the momentum up. So sure, maybe it takes a few extra years compared to going super, white knuckling and going really deep into it. But okay, if it takes a few extra years to make it into whatever it can become, that's okay for me. Like, I don't, I'm not, beating myself up about that kind of thing.
It falls right in line with the philosophy. I've talked about it on the show before, but building small things, right? One of the best paths to learning, I talked about this with Wes Boss as well, is the small chunks, right? You do something for a day, or for 2 days even, and build a small project with whatever thing you're trying to learn, or really dive into one particular thing for one day. And what you get is this super fast feedback. Like, if somebody can hook me, going back to the basketball analogy, if somebody can hook me in by saying, hey, in 30 minutes, you will have a better shot. Like, you're going to be able to you will have a better form for shooting free throws in 30 minutes. Nothing else about the game. You're not trying to figure out the business of the NBA. You're just focusing on this one minor thing, but the payoff is immediate, right? So that feeding right back into the motivation, because very few people get motivated by really large, long-running projects. And it's not that large, long-running projects are a bad thing, but rather that most of the time, those projects succeed when they're made up of a ton of tiny, smaller projects. Incredibly important, I think, to maintain that motivation by having consistent and regular wins.
Exactly. Yeah, taking small steps. And I think I subconsciously fell into this just because blog posts tend to be just by their nature, like, I think my average post is like 1,300 words or something. So it's not gigantic. So I think just knowing that was the size of the thing I needed to make, it made it more approachable, versus trying to say, okay, I'm going to write like essays or white papers or like giant reports or something. It's just, I say, hey, it's just a quick blog post. And at the same time, there's this huge kind of Pareto effect where a 1,300 word blog post can convey so much intuition.
Oh yeah.
Compared to, or even 500. I mean, I think my most popular post is like 1,000 words or something. And it's on combinations versus permutations. So like ordering lists and things, and like how to think about that. And it was just kind of a quick throwaway post in my mind. Like when I wrote it, it was like a half a day or something. I just kind of had an intuition and wrote it down. And now it's my most popular post. It's like 10% of all my traffic is just that one post. And it wasn't trying to be a big thing. It wasn't this big, huge lesson on the ins and outs. It's just, here's a little intuition, and boom, like it just sort of hit. So I think you're sort of also, when you let yourself have these small projects, you're kind of, buying more lottery tickets, so to speak. So that's another kind of aha moment, is especially with evergreen content, it always has a chance to be useful. So, you write something, 2007, and then it's still useful today. So I have one of like the 3 or 4 posts I did in 2015. One of them eventually became a top 5 post. So it was on cross products, which is kind of like a way to manipulate vectors. And so it ended up just being popular post. When when I wrote it, it wasn't very popular, but then a year later, it became really popular, and now it's like a top 5 post. And so it's one of those small little things that I didn't know ahead of time would be popular, but with enough at bats, with enough lottery tickets, one of them will hit eventually. And so you sort of just have that gentle process of just keeping that momentum up. And again, that's kind of my, again, I keep saying it, but my long-term goal is not to have an individual post burn me out or anything, because it's not worth it. I just want to keep the process going where I always feel like I can make a new post.
Yeah, that's so good. I do the same thing with Developer T. Obviously, I have 3 episodes per week rather than 1 episode every 2 or 3 weeks. And the idea is that, these smaller chunks of content, smaller projects. Obviously, I'm a big fan. But buying a lottery ticket, I love that analogy, because you never know what thing that you will say, or there's always, random quotes that are tweeted that were said on Developer T, either by me or by a guest. And I never, in that moment, planned, like, it wasn't a master plan of this is the one tweet or this is the one quote that's going to make it, to the top of, that's not the plan. And usually people who do that, unfortunately, are sorely disappointed that it didn't get as popular as they wanted it to. So instead, I say things, or I compose episodes around an idea that I think is valuable enough for me to keep track of. It's almost like a journal in that way. And I would imagine that you would say something similar about Better Explain, that you even said this about at the beginning of our interview about going back and listening to Developer T. There's episodes of Developer T that I've totally forgotten altogether. I probably will do a duplicate episode with very similar ideals or very similar points, because there's episodes of the show that I've done that I've actually just totally forgotten that I did. And that's the way the human brain works. We're intended to forget, but having that constant output, that constant small piece, is like throwing out a big wide net and seeing what you can catch.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, I essentially write things down because I know I'm going to forget them. It's kind of funny. The site, so many parts of the site are just me acknowledging my myriad limitations and saying, okay, how can I work with these? Like, I guess I've turned into a pragmatist. Like, instead of hoping that I'll be super disciplined every day, it's like, okay, I know I'm not going to be disciplined sometimes. So how can I be gentle enough with myself that I will come back when I inevitably stray? Okay, cool. And then I'm going to forget things. So how can I write something down in a very clear, friendly manner that I want to read my own writing? I'm trying to make things, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's selfish, but it's really just like, hey, like, this is, Kalid is trying to educate Kalid basically, because I know I'm going to forget. So, sort of acknowledging that reality. I think if you're looking for, and this kind of comes down to those worthiness and goodness goals and things, like, if you're looking for validation, then that's kind of this external factor which might influence. I think people might say, oh, I can't make a small post or a small program or something because it's not good enough. And it's like, well, that means the real reason you're making it is not just to explore, but it's because you're looking for validation. And that's a deeper issue. And, there's all sorts of things that might underlie that, but at least even acknowledging it might help resolve a little bit. So you sort of separate yourself from the work, where you're just exploring and you're, looking into things and you're curious, and you're not doing it to kind of get something else out of it directly. And I think there's a kind of gentleness. I mean, for Better Explained, I didn't start it to make it a business or something, but it's done better in that regard than things that I had started to make businesses. So it's kind of this weird, it's a paradox where by not trying to make it into something big, you have a better chance of actually becoming bigger.
Yeah, it is a paradox. So, it is a very interesting paradox, actually.
Yeah. And like, you can't fool yourself. You can't say, oh, I'm just going to pretend to not care, but I really do care. It's like, no, I'm just putting it out there just because I'm just having fun with it. And I think there's kind of, there's something that shines through in a lot of work when, like, you can sort of tell, right, with like music or art or anything. If somebody was just having an enjoyable time, there's something, there's something communicated there, which I think draws people in when they see it. And, but you can't, if you're doing it for that purpose, you're trying to make something just to draw people in, I think people sort of see through that.
Yeah, people are very good at decoding. This is something I read in How to Win Friends and Influence People, of all things. Great book. If you haven't read it, go get it. It's free, probably online somewhere. Fantastic book. But one of the things they talk about is, if you're trying to forge relationships for the sake of yourself, people will see it. You can't use a device of genuineness without being genuine. You can't send an email to a client for the sake of your own gain without them noticing how bizarre it feels, right? There's something off there. And there's some level of human intuition where we can pick up on that manipulation. So give people more credit than you are giving them. If you are doing that now, give people more credit. And I would say, take some time to really consider, is what I'm doing actually genuine? It's kind of a weird value to determine, but am I actually doing this because I care about, for example, developer T? Am I actually doing this because I want developers to quote unquote level up in their career? If I heard that from someone else, my immediate reaction would be, is that really what you're doing? But yeah, it really is what I'm doing. It's why there's like 350 episodes of Developer T that are totally free, and you never have to, I'm not going to belabor the point of how much I'm giving away. That's not the point here. The point is, if you want to be motivated by something, and if you want to actually capture people's attention, genuineness isn't an option. It's required.
Exactly. And I think it's required from having people believe in your, in your mission or what you're doing, but also even just for your own
health,
not sanity,
yeah.
Health. But exactly. Like, it's really, I don't know. I think that's one thing I've learned over time too. Like, I have to be honest with myself about what's working, what's not working, what I'm excited about or not. So, for example, one thing I also struggle with a little bit is that, like, you read math books. Like, if somebody were to tell you, okay, make a math lesson on some concept, most of us, we'd say, well, okay, the average textbook, we list the definition, and then there's like a theorem and a proof and maybe some practice problems. But I just had to admit to myself, that isn't, like, maybe it's just me, but that's not that interesting to me, and I don't feel like I really learn it properly that way. Like, where's the analogy? Where's the diagram? Where's the plain English version of it? Like, I have all these things that I need, and so I had to be kind of authentic to myself and say, hey, if I'm going to be true to myself, I need to include these things. And maybe it doesn't look professional. Maybe I have, for one of my posts, it's on the gradient, which is like this, it's kind of a vector concept of like moving to like the best location. And so I had this analogy of, you have the Pillsbury Doughboy in a microwave and you want to heat him up. So like, you're moving around the microwave, and it's this kind of funny, weird analogy, but it's like, for whatever reason, that one just came to me. And it's like, I said, I'm going to go with it. I'm not going to say, oh, you have a spaceship and you're trying to move through the atmosphere and no, that just didn't do it for me. So I had some funny little analogy that I thought of, and I just had to be honest with myself. So I think for your own work's sake, it comes out better, I think, when you acknowledge what's working or not, and when you have that sincerity with yourself.
Yeah, this is something I struggle with Developer T, to be honest, a moment of vulnerability, because some of the values that I hold and some of the ways that I would argue in person are different than the ways that I would talk on Developer T. So in some ways it's constructed, and I had to be a little bit more careful with how I speak to listeners on the show. But that's also a function of knowing who you're speaking to. I don't think that I'm constructing it in order to manipulate people as much as I am constructing in order to communicate well. And there's a big difference. I genuinely want to communicate well, and I genuinely want to do, to accomplish the things I'm trying to accomplish. And so, there's a big difference between just being, quote, yourself, right? And then being genuine. I can modify the way that I would speak to you. My diction is a little bit more clear when I'm talking on microphone for this podcast than it would be if I was just out with friends. And so I think there's an important fact to bring out here, because a lot of listeners to this show, you've probably listened for long enough to remember we talked about branding and how important having a brand for yourself can be. And a lot of people encode that idea of having your own brand or of marketing yourself as disingenuous, right? As that is actually not genuine. But that's not true. And composing yourself in a particular way for the sake of doing something genuine, that can be just as genuine as you letting loose all your faults, right?
Exactly. And I think being yourself doesn't mean that you don't acknowledge the background and so on of the other person. So if I'm talking, to my parents or to a friend or to a younger person, I mean, who I am it's not that it's different, but I might present myself a little bit differently just because I know the relationship, and, there might be a comfort level, or like you said, when you're speaking, on a podcast, maybe you're more clear with your diction, or, your pacing and so on. And it's not that you're not yourself. It's just that you're trying to empathize with your audience so you can connect with them, in a better way. And so to me, that's a genuine expression of interest. And it's not trying to, bamboozle them with some kind of technique or something. It's just that, I'll talk more clearly because it'll be easier to understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. And it's a really good way of thinking about personal brands. Is my brand is intended to show you that I'm empathizing with you, right? Or to be an expression of empathy, to make me more accessible to where you are, rather than being this like enigma of a figure that's really hard to get in touch with.
Exactly.
Today's episode is sponsored by Headspace. If you don't know what Headspace is, let me set up this scenario for you. Everything that we do, everything that we engage in, we need to practice. There are many different ways to practice any given thing, but everything that we want to be better at, we have to practice at it. And one of those things that we all as developers really should aspire to become better at is the practice of focus. We need focus in our lives, and we need mental clarity in our lives to be able to produce the best work, to solve difficult problems, and to reduce the distractions around us, right? These are things that are not really, they aren't really optional for the average developer. We can't allow ourselves to be distracted and also expect to level up in our careers. Now, as I said, there are many ways to practice just about any given thing, right? You can practice focus by actually going through your day and then evaluating how well you focused. That's kind of a passive way of practicing focus. An active way of practicing focus would be something like meditation. And that's exactly who our sponsor is today. It's an application that makes meditation simple. This is an iPhone or an Android app. And you can find it in the App Store, and you can try it for free. It's Headspace, right? Headspace is sponsoring today's episode, and they are also a company that is growing incredibly fast. They have over 10 million downloads worldwide. This concept of meditation is taking hold. There are plenty of people who are benefiting from it and then sharing their stories, and it crosses over, the boundaries of different cultural norms. It crosses over belief boundaries. So if you haven't tried meditation, I would highly recommend this, especially as someone who uses your mind each and every day. Your mind very much so needs something like meditation to work properly. So go and check it out. I've used Headspace for over a year, on and off. I'm not super great at my meditation practice, I'll be honest with you, but every time that I feel unbalanced, or I feel like I need a little bit of clarity, I need to have a jolt of inspiration, usually the first thing that I go to is meditation. And the first thing that I think about when I think about meditation is Headspace, without fail. So they are building a world-class engineering team, as I said before, with teams based in San Francisco and in Los Angeles. So if you're interested in joining a company that's working to improve the health and the happiness of the world, not just a small group of people, but everyone in the world can benefit from meditation, you should apply. You can go to headspace.com/join-us. Of course, that link will be in the show notes. You can go directly to spec.fm/headspace, all one word, to go directly to that job page. Thank you again so much to Headspace for sponsoring today's episode of Developer Tea. Okay, so all of this to say, we're coming to a close here. Developer Tea is supposed to be short, but these interviews, when they go this well, it's so hard to cut things short. So hopefully people have listened all the way through the end of this one. This might be one of the first interviews to go to 3 parts, by the way.
That'd be great.
We'll see. Two things. One, if you could go back and redo one thing that you did along the way with Better Explained, if there was some like a turn you took or a decision you made or something that you maybe a bad habit you picked up along the way that you since had to remove from your everyday, what would you do differently if you could?
Oh, good question. I guess the two things, from a practical point of view, I wish I started my email newsletter sooner. So just from a kind of the mechanics of running a site or a business, so when I started the site, I had like an RSS feed, and that's how I had subscribers. And then of course RSS kind of like Google, they kind of shut down Google Reader and so on. So RSS sort of died in kind of like the mid or late 2000s. And so then suddenly you're trying to scramble to get your readers kind of connection back. So then I started an email list, I think in 2013. And so that's been going really well. And people, email I think is one of the most long-lived forms of keeping in touch with people. So I'm hoping that method will last for a long time. So I wish that I had started with a more permanent system, or at least a system that wouldn't be at the mercy of kind of external technologies as much. And so that's one thing I do fear about Facebook and Twitter and so on, is that you're sort of a sharecropper on their land, and they kind of control the connection to your audience. So if they decide to charge you, or if they shut down, or if they change their plans, suddenly you have to rebuild your audience again. So I'm actually glad in a way that Google shut down Google Reader, because it kind of forced me to realize that I needed that versus, going for 2 decades and then having a shutdown. So that would have been maybe kind of from a tactical point of view, what I would have done differently. And then I guess from a personal sort of approach, I think it's hard to say. Like I'm not really a big fan of regrets, so to speak, just because I think everything shapes you. And so for me, for example, the frustration of my first math class, do I regret that? I did at the time. I hated being in that class, but looking back, that class made me start Better Explained. I think if I had a normal class, so yeah, it's hard to say like a problem or something that a mistake. I mean, maybe it pushed you in a direction to fix it. And without knowing about the problem, you never would have fixed it. So me realizing that I wasn't learning in a way that was effective, it was only highlighted by having a really ineffective class. So it's sort of, there's kind of an ebb and flow there. But I do wish, and this is something I still work on, is giving myself permission for those small steps. I think I'm much better at it, allowing myself to make these small little changes. And it comes down to that separation of the work from your value, your worth or whatever emotional attachment you're putting to it. I think it would have been helpful to have separated that earlier, but at least I feel like I'm on the path of that now. So I feel I still have dozens or maybe hundreds of half-finished drafts that I feel like aren't ready, or I need to do something to fix them. And then I kind of know, though, that it would still be useful if somebody's trying to learn about this topic. Whatever draft I have would still be useful. I think there's an intuition there. Maybe it's not as polished as I could make it, but it'd still be helpful. So I'm still trying to give myself that permission and sort of separate that kind of the work, from the process. So it's an ongoing thing. And I think I'm thankful I've made a lot of progress, but I suppose if I could have worked in that earlier, that would have been helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. And really good answers, because I do agree that the things that you go through, the negative experiences, or what is, what in our minds may be negative experiences, they are certainly usually instrumental in shaping us, particularly the very negative, like the spikes in either direction are instrumental in shaping us, because we respond to those things more often than not. And so a lot of the time, for example, some of my kind of retrospective perspective on Developer T is a result of me having gone through a bunch of frustration too, right? Me encountering a lot of that imposter syndrome and feeling like I was being, disingenuous by applying for jobs in this field, and I just didn't want other people to feel that. So yeah, absolutely, I'm with you 100%. I agree that our pain and our mistakes, it's not the best idea to look at those and try to reduce them as much as it is to simply learn from them in one way or another. So very, very good stuff. the other question, I'm not going to ask you the two questions that I always ask my guests on Developer Tea, because I asked you the first time you were on the show. So these are the two questions I've replaced it with. The first one was, if you could go back to the beginning, what would you change? The second one is, you're looking to the future now for Better Explained. What do you see kind of emerging into the future? Is it going to be, basically remaining in the same field, but with more insights? Are you going to change the way you're doing things, new formats, anything like that?
Oh, great question. Let's see. I've had a few long-standing dreams, I suppose, where I think for whatever, and this is again one of those things where I've kind of made attempts and starts, and it hasn't quite been the way that I like, so I kind of keep working on it. But one project that I would like to make is sort of an intuitive Wikipedia, or essentially kind of a glossary. So Wikipedia is meant to be a reference. Like, you go to a topic and you're just going to get a bunch of details, and it's factual and correct, but it's not necessarily meant for a beginner. And so what I would love is for any topic, in math, it could be programming. I mean, practically speaking, that's what I know the best. So that's probably, where it would start. But essentially saying, okay, I want to learn about imaginary numbers. What's like the best diagram on that? What's the best analogy? What's a really good example? What's a plain English, 2-sentence description? And finally, what's like a succinct technical description? So basically having kind of the intuitive glossary version of pretty much any topic that you feel like you could just quickly look up. So I think it's kind of funny. Dictionaries have failed us, because I would never look up imaginary numbers in a dictionary to learn about them. Because
it's just another black hole, right?
It's another black hole, and it's like a dictionary. The point of a dictionary, or maybe a glossary or something, is to say you don't know a concept, you look up in the dictionary, and then you learn it. Like, isn't that the goal of a dictionary, to teach you about something that? But we know that for a lot of concepts, it's not going to work. Like, if I look up the color red in a dictionary, it's not going to work. And why is that? Well, it's not in color. And
yeah, exactly.
It's just kind of ridiculous. Like, we just know you don't look up red in a dictionary. And I'm kind of thinking, well, why not? Why couldn't they have a diagram? Why couldn't they just add things beyond text? And so the advantage of dictionary is that it's succinct. Like, at least I know if it's a word, I can get a definition in like a sentence or something. And so why don't we have that for math? It's not trying to teach you, like, a dictionary is not trying to teach you about the history of red and the meaning and all this stuff. It's just, here's what it is in 3 seconds. Here's something useful about it. And so I feel like Wikipedia it's not aiming for that. And just a lot of sites aren't trying to help people get that really quick intuition. And so that's my, I suppose, philosophy of the world, is that there is something really quick, really useful that we can share about something. And we're not going to be experts, but it'll make us enjoy it a lot more. And by the time we do read the Wikipedia article, we at least have a frame of mind where we can understand it a lot better versus just starting from scratch. So
it's almost like the serious version of something like Urban Dictionary, right? Where you get like the cultural and the multiple definitions with better examples, and there's more context, and it's like a smarter. It actually assumes that you're intending to use the information rather than like a 1-to-1, right? With the color red, if you look up red in the dictionary, it would say a color, like, or a color that you would find on a stop. I mean, I don't even know that they could do that. A color of the most common color for roses or something like that, right? Whereas, with what you're talking about, you could use it to say, okay, red typically is used to evoke these things. Here are some particularly important uses of red. For example, a stop sign, so red may also evoke these emotions. It may evoke a sense of caution or a sense of emergency. And all of those things put together are so much more informative, but it's kind of that gap between an encyclopedia and a dictionary, right? Where the dictionary is way too prescriptive. But an encyclopedia talks about history, and what you're saying is very true, that Wikipedia just doesn't. It's not where I go to gain an intuition, right? I'm not going there to. I'm going there to learn about the etymology of something, or to learn about what its place in history was, not about how I would use it today.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a kind of comfort, and I haven't really put my finger on how to describe that, but it's sort of, yeah, kind of an intuitive dictionary or something that's just trying to. Uh, I imagine I have all these little scenarios in my head, but imagine that you had a 30-second phone call with yourself before the start of a class. So you could go back in time and you could call yourself and say, hey, hey, young Jonathan, before you start this math class, here's 30 seconds. So what would you say in 30 seconds before starting a certain math class? Like, you're not going to say, oh, the way to do, you would just say, hey, think of it like this. And here's the key intuition, and visualize this and imagine a mountain or something, or imagine the Pillsbury Doughboy. Like, I would be talking about analogies and metaphors. And I'm trying to think of what's the high value, really like dream 30-second introduction to something.
Man, that's really cool.
Yeah. It's like, what could I do with 30 seconds? And I would say, hey, look at it, go to Wikipedia afterwards. But right now, just think about this, and this will help you. And I feel like there's kind of a gap there. So yeah, I've been ruminating a little bit on how to just make something like that simple and ideally, collaborative and votable and things, but not have it turn like I'd rather have, I don't want it to be like, one problem with Wikipedia is that inevitably it just grows. Like, every article will just get more and more details, and then you have this giant thing. And so I might even say it's almost like a Twitter style restriction where every topic can be no longer than some amount or something. And it's really just to kind of distill it down into, brevity is a virtue in a lot of cases. And so, don't let brevity fall by the wayside for the sake of completeness. Just let's get it across as quickly as we can.
Something we talked about on our last interview, and something that everyone at least needs to go to Better Explained and look at Khalid's explanation of this. But you can also go and listen to that interview as well. The adept model. I think it would be really interesting to see you weave that into this platform, whatever the platform ends up being, and say, okay, these are the areas that you can explain through, right? So using adept, and at the bottom, you would have a very short technical description, but with the top being, hey, like, most of this content is going to be intuition building, right? And hopefully having some level of completeness or uniformity between one thing and another. I think using that adept model could be an interesting opportunity for that.
Thanks. Exactly. And that's one thing I was hoping to build in, is basically for any topic, what is the best analogy, or like the highest voted analogy, highest voted diagram? Like shouldn't there be a diagram? Like every math concept, shouldn't there be a diagram for that? Like, isn't it weird? Like, shouldn't there be, like,
for everything?
For everything, like every single, I mean, like
99% of the time I see the formalized notation formula for a math concept, and then way down the page I see a picture, and I'm like, the picture is what I wanted to see first. Like,
right, exactly. Yeah, and just to understand the formula, exactly. And so then the same thing, like an example, shouldn't there be one like really good example for every concept, like a real, and ideally real world? Sometimes it's not possible with math, but just like, what's like the best example? So for example, information theory, we talked about the highway system. Information theory is the field of logic or math that deals with, utilizing information in the most compact way. It's very technical. Hey, you know how the highways have a pattern in the numbers? That's kind of what we're talking about. And suddenly that is a super familiar system, or ISBNs or something. Like there might be some example that we can draw on that's really common to people, or an analogy, like something else. So I feel like, why doesn't I kind of have this mental checklist, which is a topic that I'm trying to convey. I should give you these 5 things, like an example, a diagram, all these things. That way you at least have some hope of understanding it. And so exactly, I'd love to have maybe each topic is a checklist, and each item is like the top thing in each item is what you see, and then you can expand it out and people can vote on the other ones. Like, I would love to have, see, now I'm getting really excited, but I'm trying to think of some way to do this, and not, I don't want to over engineer it. I want to make it pretty simple, but making it easy to collect the best examples, diagrams, everything for a topic, and then you sort of get this urban dictionary for math, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to look through multiple examples or multiple diagrams would be huge. I mean, that's what I use Google image search for the most, probably, is figuring out, like, what is the shape of this problem? What is the shape of this solution? How does for example, with JavaScript, since once again going back to JavaScript January, understanding how React and Flux work. You hear these buzzwords in the development industry, and you hear that it's going to change your life, it's going to make everything better, but to really understand how it's going to change your life and make everything better, you have to go and learn, for 3 days and use the thing before you ever even see how it's going to, make things better. Now, developers have gotten better and better at this, showing things and giving videos and talks, and there is more content out there that shows that stuff a little bit more up front, and there's demos and that kind of stuff. But a lot of the time, when I'm at the very beginning of learning React and Flux, I had to go and watch like 5 or 10 20-minute videos before I really understood what was going on. Now, I could get the basics of it, but how it changed the way that I was doing things already, or how it made things better, that was hard to get an intuition for until I started using it. So I think this is such an interesting concept, because visually seeing the data flow, for example, for React, where is data coming from, where is it going, and knowing how that changes with Flux was a big moment.
Exactly. And I do the Google image trick myself. When I'm trying to learn something, I'll look at the Google images before the regular web search results, like the Fourier transform.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're going to get some web results and you'll see the formula, but where is it used? And suddenly you see all these pictures, like as audio signals, and maybe like you see all these waveforms, and you sort of get an intuition really quickly that something's going on with these patterns and these cycles. And sometimes there's little interactive applets and things. And I'll try to play with that first before we know I like to use the color red example just because it's so visceral. Like we know that if you're going to show somebody, or if somebody's curious about red, like an alien asks you, what is red? You're going to show them an image. You're not going to go to Wikipedia and read them the description of the wavelength or whatever. And we just know that red is something that you need to experience. And to me, math isn't that different. Like math is just, it's another thing that you can actually experience. Like you can describe it and we can get super technical and we can talk about the history and all this stuff, but there's still a kind of experience element to it. And I think all of that historical stuff, it's a little bit more easily appreciated once you have an experience. So suddenly you experience it first and then you go to the technical and then you understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. I think, with math, not to belabor the point, but because it can be expressed in technical terms and because it is taught in technical terms, we tend to want to explain it once again in technical terms rather than showing it, right? And colors are not taught in technical terms. It's almost like we learn those correctly, right? Like we learn those as children. We learn those with toys. It's a yellow duck. Like we learn that from a very young age. And then later on, only when it's really necessary do we actually get the formalized introduction to different wavelengths, right? And colors that we, like you were saying, fuchsia, colors we can't see. Way down the road, figuring out, okay, what are the properties here that I could use with colors that I didn't know before? But the intuition, the experience, learning the basic, what is red, well, that happens with a much simpler, to your earlier point, everything can be simplified to an intuitive level. I think colors are a really massively complex topic that we teach children that barely know how to talk yet. And it's, we understand colors from a very young age. So what can we do with math, or what can we do with programming or with information theory or even language? What can we do with these things to make them more accessible at an intuitive level first? Is a very, very interesting discussion. I think it's the future of education, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And actually, you just, the way you're describing it made me just have a little aha myself, is that I think the reason why colors and touch and sight, like music, you can analyze music, but you can appreciate it directly. And colors, you see them, and then, texture, you feel it. And a lot of, activities, like you feel them physically. And I think it's essentially because they're tied directly to one of our senses. So we have, sight, sound, hearing, taste, everything. And it's almost impossible not to experience it. Like you can conceptualize a color, but it's really difficult to not see it. Like somebody shows you a red ball, you're going to see the red, and there's kind of a wordless experience that's happening before you even start talking about it. But the problem is with math and a lot of other concepts is that we only have this kind of mental experience. It's not like a physical sense that is kind of like directly here. And so in some ways our words and all these things get in the way. Like we're not directly experiencing them. We're sort of covering them with like this level of words and extra analysis and thought. And so that kind of gets in the way. But I think there is kind of a way to taste math, so to speak.
Yeah,
like that's kind of what I like. That's sort of what's happening. I mean, at least that's what happened to me when I visualized it. And I think when you visualize math, that's happening. You're kind of experiencing it wordlessly. Like you're sort of seeing something happen, but you're not putting all these descriptions on it. You're just kind of, whoa, like something cool is happening here. And I think that is maybe what I mean by an intuition, is that you're, along with the description that is there and is true, you also had the flavor come through, which is kind of inexpressible, but it's giving you this understanding, which makes the technical description so much more vivid. So I think that might be it, is that like our senses are directly wired to our brain, so we can't help but experience it. But with math, we have to kind of learn how to experience it.
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I think, in the same way that we experience different senses different ways, and what you were talking about earlier with the dictionary and trying to describe red, it's very difficult to put that into words. Part of this is because all of our formalization and all of our descriptions and numbers themselves, really, the letter form of a number, all of these things are just symbolic, right? They are abstractions of the underlying reality. And this is getting metaphysical really fast, but the description of something is not the same as that thing. And so when you start trying to describe something to another person, you have a large gap to make up, that otherwise, if you go down to the lower level of the abstraction, a lot of times you're going to learn the underlying concept better, faster, right? So the idea of binary, or of creating a system of binary switches and structures, and that's how a computer works, right? If you give a child a railway set, then they have a way of making the train go to different places, right? And if they combine multiple switches for the train, then the train can end up, going on many different unique paths depending on how you change the switches around. Having that level of intuition, and then you can say, hey, you know what? Binary is kind of like that train set you had. When you combine multiple true-false statements together, you can come up with really complex and really powerful structures that power, many other things, right? So, and then you can use that to abstract into different areas, and all of these things can happen because of that one single idea of the switch. If we could gain that level of intuition for everything we learn, I think we would learn a little bit better, more completely.
Exactly. No, and that reminds me too that a lot of the times the words kind of keep us in a box to some extent, where we have one interpretation of something.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we think that, X means Y, like a circle means round. It's like, well, it also means symmetry. It means constant rotation. It means, it's an infinitely sided polygon. It means there's, 50 interpretations of a circle. And so sometimes those words and descriptions that we use are basically just like they're a property, but not all the properties. And so that's kind of part of learning as well, is that I keep myself like I'm constantly willing to be surprised by very simple things like addition and counting. And I think actually in computer science especially, one of the hardest things is counting, like combinatorics, like how many possibilities emerge when we have these circumstances.
Yeah.
It's so difficult. Like there's so many, wait, did you consider this and this? And so it's funny, counting in a lot of ways can be some of the most difficult parts of math. And it's just that we have this grade school association with counting, so we think it's so it's simple. And there's a lot of kind of weird corner cases and things. So I've kind of learned to not be too tied to any specific interpretation and say, okay, this is my like Kalid 2017. This is what Kalid 2017 thinks about circles. And then in 10 years, who knows? Like, I mean, I'll probably look very naive, and it's okay. Like I missed this property that's super fundamental. And so I think having that willingness, and again, it's about not taking things personally. Like not seeing all the elements of a concept doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about you. It just means that you had a certain interpretation. That's what you were taught. You stumbled upon a new interpretation, and maybe it's more useful, but you don't have to feel bad or, bad about yourself that you didn't see all the big picture in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anybody who's listening to this, if you are not inspired to go learn something new today, then maybe you won't be inspired today to learn anything. If you are interested in hearing more from Kalid, obviously, betterexplained.com. The email sign up is right on that front page, isn't it?
It is. Yep. And on each post, there's a little after the post thing. I don't do the annoying oh gosh, those things kill me, like this full screen overlay.
Oh yeah.
Like, hey, especially when you're reading an article, you haven't even read it yet, and they're like trying to, oh my gosh, no, that thing kills me. So basically, yeah, on the homepage or just after an article.
I went to Twitter to complain about one of these recently. And then I remembered that I tweeted that I'm only going to use my Twitter account. It's a challenge to only use my Twitter account to encourage, to teach and to inspire people. So no complaining on Twitter anymore for me. But I was going to complain about these nag pop-ups, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening right now who have gotten great conversion rates from these things. No shame on you or anything, but I personally would not ever implement a nag screen that says, "No, I do not want to make more money," or
the guilt nag.
Yeah,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's like this false dichotomy thing that they're playing off of, and you have to click the no, no, I don't want to get smarter. It's like
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, yeah, no, I want to, stay in the ignorant cave and not, or something. Oh my gosh. No, I mean, I think in certain circumstances, like, I know they're effective in a lot of ways, but my goal is to, I'm my own reader, it's like I often read my own articles. So like, I don't want to be blocked from reading my own stuff with like a pop-up or whatever. And so I'm not going to do some special, like, oh, only Kalid gets to see the normal version of the site or something. I just try to make something that would be okay for me.
Yeah.
And I'm okay if it's slightly slower than it would take otherwise. It's okay. I mean, like, again, I'm planning this for decades. So let's say it takes an extra 2 years because I didn't harass people. Okay, fine. It's 2 years. Like, it's not, to me, it's not a big problem.
You feel like it was earned more that way, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, I guess. And also just, I think I have my philosophy, and again, everybody's got different styles and things, but so far I've been trying to follow my intuition about what I should be doing.
Yeah.
And so my intuition is probably wrong on a lot of things, I'm sure, about business. Like, I'm not I'm learning a lot of business and marketing and, sales and all these things. I'm learning it on my own too, but I'm just trying to follow my kind of gut intuitions. And so one of them is that I'm trying to empathize with people and just treat people as I would want to be treated. So how would you want something explained? If you came to read an article, how would you want it presented? If I was to ask for your email address, how would I do that? Like, I'm just trying to think for myself. Like, I'm imagining, every reader is another Kalid, and so how would Kalid treat Kalid, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I feel the same way. One of the reasons why most of the episodes are short is because I wanted, I hated super long podcasts, which is ironic for this episode. But
I was gonna say, I'm sorry if I ruined your.
No, it's actually. I think the content is periodically we have these long episodes, and it's only because I believe the content is so worthy and worthwhile. And so it's certainly not a problem. So yeah, go and sign up for Better Explained emails. I get them to my email address, every time Kalid sends one out. It sits in my email. I don't even mark it as read until I read it, so that it's sitting at the top. We all have, I'm sure, overflowing inboxes, some more than others, but that is one of the emails that I do let come to my inbox because I've gotten so much value from the stuff that you do. So on behalf of all of the members of the community who read what you do, thank you very much for following that and really pushing that agenda forward of delivering value that you yourself find valuable. I do believe that you have a gift for intuition, and I don't know if that word is off limits or not, but I think that you have a talent for intuition. That's probably a better word to use for that. So thank you very much for what you do.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear. I think the most I can hope for is somebody gets value out of it, and knowing that it's useful for you is awesome to hear. Thank you.
Kalid, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I hope that you'll come back again one day. Maybe another year goes past and you have another set of insights to share with our listeners.
Oh, I would love it. I would love it anytime.
All right. Perfect.
Great. And let me stop the recording. Wow, that was awesome.
That was great. It was almost 3 hours. Yeah. For listening to today's episode of Developer Tea, my interview with Kalid Azad. Kalid is such a great thinker, and hopefully you were inspired by him like I was. Thank you again to today's incredible sponsor, Headspace. If you are not meditating yet, then I would recommend you go and check this out, especially if you haven't meditated because you thought it looked weird or it looked too spiritual or something like that. There are plenty of people of all different beliefs, all different backgrounds that are using Headspace to improve their mental health and even their physical health. There are some studies that show that that meditation can improve even your physical health. So go and check it out, headspace.com. If you're interested in working for a company that has mental health at the front of their vision all the time, then go to headspace.com/join-us, or you can go to spec.fm/headspace and go directly to that job page for Headspace. Thank you again to Headspace for sponsoring Developer Tea. If you don't want to miss out on future episodes, make sure you subscribe. And I haven't asked for these in a while, but I would love to hear your reviews. You can always go and leave a review on iTunes. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, enjoy your tea.